Let's look at this next case titled Global Dental Equipment, How Variance Analysis Can Help a Startup Business Survive Growing Pains. You can see this is from the Journal of Applied Finance. And this is an accounting class. This has a lot of good stuff about accounting, especially budgeting. And flex budgeting is a key part of this, why I selected it. Because otherwise I'd just skip right by something that said finance on it. So what's going on in this case? You can pull that up there online and look at it. You got this gentleman that is an entrepreneur, and he has started up this business, Global Dental Equipment, GDE, that has grown to where he can't really control everything that's going on. He's finding himself becoming more of a manager and less of an entrepreneur. He's got a board of directors. It says there at the bottom of page 1 that is going to help him through this process of becoming a larger company. But the business is primarily buying used dental equipment. Most of their business is from consignment. Some of it is from ACT, which means they're not buying it, they're just selling it. They find a dental office or someplace that wants to get rid of equipment, and then they sell it to someone else, and then obviously make a profit on that. That's most of their business. Probably 80, almost 90% of their business is consignment. They've also got inventory where they've actually purchased and then resell. And they've also got shipping, a part of their business, maybe 7-8%, handling, and also service, doing a turnkey job of not just buying and selling, but actually installing in the process that goes on there. So when you look at this case and the questions that are back here on page 5, question 1 says, describe the strategic changes for GDE. It sounds like a management class, but this is good here, sort of a final case for this course, because this class is called Accounting Information for Decision Making, right? You can make any decision without accounting information. Numbers. How did the business change as it grew and evolved? What is an entrepreneurial crisis? What were the triggers for this crisis for Jonathan Edwards and GDE? Now, question 3, I have already put together for you. I took what is in Exhibit A and created this one-page sheet. Let me see if I can share that. There it is. Let's see if I make it a little bit bigger. And what I've done is taken that one page, which is page 7, Appendix A, Contribution Margin Statement, that shows revenue, variable costs. I'm not sure if that's still being shared. What's happened? Okay, I think we're still going. Thought Zoom knocked me off. All right. Oh, this is strange. All right, I'll keep going here. All right, so what I'm sharing here is what's been given to you, and I've taken that Appendix A and I put this into a format here in Excel, which breaks this out into the contribution margin format. Now, what's contribution margin format? I think I've talked about that earlier in a video where you're looking at revenues minus expenses, excuse me, variable expenses or variable costs gives you contribution margin. Revenue minus variable costs, contribution margin minus fixed costs gives you net income. Very basic. Revenue minus variable costs is contribution margin minus fixed costs is net income. All right, contribution margin format. This is variable cost. What's variable? Revenue is variable, right? Revenue is 100% variable. And if you sell 1 unit versus 10 units, it's whatever 1 times the sales price is and 10 times the sales price. Variable costs vary directly in relation to revenue. And then fixed costs is things like depreciation, SG&A, most of it. That it has nothing to do in particular with the revenue generator and the variable costs. So the fixed costs are broken out. It's like you have to cover those fixed costs. So what you see there, let me share this screen again. Why this is being so unruly. All right, so what you see there is, and this is just copied, actual versus budget for 2012 for consignment, inventory, shipping, handling, service, and so forth. Variable costs, and then that leaves you with consignment, or excuse me, leaves you with contribution margin. So that sale, consignment, B3 minus what, B11 should give you B19. All these numbers are in here without any calculations. I've just plugged those in. There's your total revenue, there's your consignment, excuse me, there's your total revenue, there's your total variable cost, and there's your total contribution margin. All right, and so fixed costs, and that gives you your operating income. So for each of these, you can tell where most of your product is being sold. You could actually make this a little more interesting by putting in an extra cell there and calculate the percentages. So what is my contribution margin percentage here for consignment? So I want to do something like equal to 1 minus that sale divided by that sale. So that says that my contribution margin is what, 67%? All right, what if I do this for each of these? I think I did that right. No, I don't need to do the 1. It's equal to that sale divided by consignment. So my contribution margin is 33%. And I can just copy that down here. And see overall my contribution margin is 33%, which makes sense because this consignment is most of my business, right? Equal to revenue divided by total revenue. 88% of my revenue is coming from consignment. And if I want to copy that down as well, put a $sign in front of it before I copy it, make it stationary. Yeah, 88%, 9% shipping, 1% inventory, 2% service. That's what's generating income. Of course, 33% of the revenue, 33% contribution margin, because all this fixed costs I grouped into 1. I did not break this out like Exhibit A has. I just grouped it all into one because it doesn't matter where it's being spent. I mean, you can do analysis of that on its own individually if there's cost cutting there. But this says 33% margin, contribution margin on consignment. Look at inventory. That's a huge margin, 81%. I want to try to increase that, right? Your inventory, buy and resell yourself. It's like that's where most of your profit is. Shipping, it's less than consignment. Handling is about the same. Service, it's like service and inventory are some opportunities, right? So you might want to consider putting that into your spreadsheet. The big part of this assignment is what you see out here to the right. You need to come up with, well, first of all, your variance there. Y'all be able to calculate your variance, right? More revenue, a higher revenue means what? A positive variance, right? Less revenue, like this one's going to be negative, right? You should do that for each of these. Same way with costs. If your costs are higher, that's a negative. If your costs are lower, that's a positive. And then contribution margins is like revenue. The more contribution margin you have, the better. It means it would be a plus and not a negative, or brackets, or excuse me, parentheses. Then you want to do a flexible budget. What is a flexible budget? This says I'm going to flex my budget based on what my actual volume was, right? And that's where you want to do some type of analysis over here, because these are production or sales numbers. I'm not sure why there's fractional sales numbers, but there are. But consignment was supposed to actually sell 5,427.5 units, and they sold 6,151. So they sold more units, didn't they? That's a good thing. So the flex budget should be a higher number there. What about inventory? Inventory was less than what was planned. Shipping was more. Handling was less. Service was the same. The total number there is irrelevant. That right there, because you're not going to use that for anything. Because all these are different types of units and how they're equating this. So you can leave it on there. You don't have to delete it like I did. So the next step, you really ought to calculate some budgeted numbers per unit, right? What's the actual and what's the budget? There's your actual and what's your budget. So in this case, I'll just do one of them. Equal to actual dollars divided by actual units. And budget was what? There's my budget. So it looks like we sold more, didn't we? More than budget quantity. But look at the sales price. Because that is what? That is actual. And that is budget, if I can spell right. So you gotta do that for each of these. You know, all you do is just copy it, right? And bottom line doesn't mean a whole lot, but that tells you something about your mix. You sold more, but you sold it less, right? So what are you doing here with a flexible budget? Flexible budget says, I want a budget that is actually based on actual units that I sold. A budget based on actual units times the original price that I was planning to sell it for. So my flexible budget there should be what? It should be equal to my actual volume times my budgeted dollars, right? So that's what my budget really should have been. If I'd had perfect knowledge back at the beginning of the year, 2012, which I think is the year of this, if I had perfect knowledge back then, knowing exactly what I was going to sell, that's what my budget should have been for units, for actual units at the budgeted dollar amount. Now, you're not changing your budget rate per unit. So you're going to do that for each of these down through here. And when it's all said and done, you're doing the same thing here for variable costs. Because variable costs, again, you're going to do a per unit based on these actuals and budget, right? You copy that down and do that, but do the same thing right there. Guess we could do it like this. Copy. My fingers won't work. All right, and then the same thing down here, right? So it looks like my consignment cost per unit was lower than the budget. So my cost was lower, but I sold it for less as well. Probably depends on the equipment. I mean, there's probably all different kinds of whatever it is, dental, if it's dental chairs or x-ray machines or whatever. That, of course, that's part of this assignment that you're going to explain what has taken place. But you need to put together a flexible budget down through here, and I gave you the check numbers at the bottom. That's what it should equal to. When it's all said and done, so if your numbers don't equal that, then you've done something wrong up here. That's your check numbers. And then this part out here, that's something you should do as well. All right, so that, when you look at the case, and maybe I could share the actual questions on here, because you don't really want to look at me while I talk, do you? Under content. There's what I just shared. The variance analysis. No, that was the budget. So what we're going to look at here is the actual case that I've been talking about. Let me download that. There you go. So you can read down through here. I've left out a lot of this about what's going on your management types that are in the program and marketing. Found this interesting, as well as finance, not just accountants. But when we get down to these questions, you know, it's interesting here. It says that presented the profit and loss statement, and he didn't have any of this, what's in Appendix A. Appendix A is what was developed in order to shed light on it. What I've got here in this Excel spreadsheet is even more of a summary of what you saw in this Appendix A. But what does he say here? He says, they explain that accounting information is very useful for evaluating product performance and decision making when it's classified by product and by revenue, variable costs, and fixed costs. That's what that screen was I showed you for that Excel sheet, right? So what you see there, as they explain, the board members explain that calculating variance is more than just taking the difference between actual and budget line items. They need to know what caused these variances, right? Look what it says down here. The variances can also be explained between the actual quantity of product and service that was sold and what was budget expected at the time of the financial goals. That's what I was doing out there to the right-hand side and coming up with those actual per units and budget per units. Very important. So you, in essence, are flexing your budget. Your original budget is being flexed to the actual sales levels. Every company I've worked for does this. Forecasting, flex budget. You don't just put a budget out there and leave it for the year and say, well, we had a lot more volume or we had a lot less volume, but we don't really know how we did in relation to our new sales revenue. But you've got to flex your budget based on that. That's why you break it out, the cost behavior, into fixed and variable, right? That's why you do this. Very fundamental. So that's what the challenge is, to make these calculations. The board members insist that Johnson should prepare a flex budget, which includes a volume adjusted column. That's the column that says flexible budget, right? This new column allows for variance calculations that separate the effects of selling price and purchasing costs from sales and purchase quantities. Each product and service line item. And right there. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to come up with a new budget, flexible budget, based on the actual volume right there. And I would do what I'm showing here. You don't have to, but you should. I mean, the other way to do it is your flexible budget is equal to what? I3, this is another way to do it. I3 divided by J3 times the actual, or excuse me, the original budget. 6306,635. Get rid of the decimal places where you know how to do that. Not like that. 6306,635. So you can do that without actually doing this out here. But you need to have this mix out here to see if you sold more or if the cost per, excuse me, the revenue per unit was more or less than budget. You know what the volume change is. What about the selling price? And then look at the cost of each. What are the issues there as far as your sales mix? One of the questions. Okay, so back to this case. We get down here into the meat of this. There are 5 questions. Again, number 3. I've done that. Well, I guess I've kind of done that as well. A, B, and C. Question D. I'm not sure what they're trying to say there. Like I said, this is a finance case study. I would ignore D, so you can ignore that question. I've done, well, you're going to do this. I mean, I've got the actual data in here. You just need to finish the spreadsheet. But this is for A, B, and C, what you see there. And then lastly, on 4 and 5, analyze and describe the potential factors that underlie unfavorable and favorable variances for each variance calculating requirement 3. So it's really, and then provide recommendations. How do you improve sales and operating income? So if we go back to this, right, when you get this finished, you're going to see contribution margins, and you can add a column like this like I did. But look at this and use common sense. As a business leader, it has nothing to do with journal entries. You're just creating a flex budget. Now, we don't really cover budgets much in accounting, in undergrad, or grad, for that matter. So this is really more of a finance, managerial type thing that you understand flex budgets and what's going on. The format, yeah, is accounting. Revenue minus variable costs is contribution margin. But you need to come up with figuring out what's going on in your company. Are there areas you need to be focusing on? Are there areas that trouble you? There's other comments in there that you can read and bring into the discussion, but you shouldn't have any trouble reaching 1,500 words, and you don't really need to do a lot of research on this case. It's really more application of what you've learned on this case, and then trying to apply this with as a manager in your other classes in your MBA course. So I hope that helps you. I don't want to talk too much about it because then it really makes it, you don't have to think as much. So the intent here is for you to study, read the case, read it closely, not just watch my video and then go out and start writing. The video is just intended to give you a general picture of what I showed you there with this Excel sheet and what you need to do there. Gave you the check numbers there at the bottom. You can freeze this and look at what it's supposed to be. Based in order to calculate your flex budget. So go ahead and jump in there and read the case and reread it. Pick up on all the nuances and then give me some type of answer on all those questions back there in the back. Good luck and have a great day.